evening, everybody. My name is Madi Cos-Vargas, and today I'm going to be telling you guys about Love and Loss as it represents into the works of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet and F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Now, the images you see on the screen, you see, of course, Romeo and Juliet in the top left corner, Daisy and Jay Gatsby dancing with each other, which these two images represent, of course, the love that the couples have for each other, or quote-unquote love, as we're going to be speaking throughout this presentation, which these are, of course, are all the way to the left, not really paying much attention to the skull crossbones, which is on the right side of the screen, alluding to the eventual loss that each one of these characters are going to face within their respective stories. Alright, now we're going to talk about William Shakespeare and his literary time period, which is the Renaissance, specifically the English or the Northern Renaissance. And some characteristics of this literary time period is, of course, humanism. Now, for those of you who may not understand what humanism is, think of it as the most basic definition we're going to give to you is the universal man, or someone who is very well-rounded and very well-versed in various different things. And example of this is that in addition to someone being very academically focused and well-versed in various academic subjects, they need to be, of course, an athlete. They need to have money. They need to be knowing all these different languages. They need to have wonderful social skills. And I know some of you guys are thinking that, well, this sounds very familiar. Where am I thinking about this before? Well, we see this a lot in our school systems where colleges and high schools want their students to be well-rounded. They don't just want them to focus on solely academics. They want them to do different things. So if you guys wonder where that came from, it came straight from humanism. And another characteristic of this later time period is challenging the old ways. Now, this can mean a few different things. It could be someone straight up telling someone, sticking up to the man, hey, I don't like what you're doing. I'm going to start up my own military, make my own nation. I'm going to listen to the church. That's one way of challenging the old ways. Or just making a new invention, like, hey, I think this invention works better. I'm going to write the Gettysburg Press and just make the first printer that Europe has made and make my invention. So that's some of the ways that people challenge the old way of doing things. Now, before we move on, of course, you see my little excerpt right here. And what it is that inspired Shakespeare to even started writing, came from a court case where he was tried for being caught poaching on a lord's land. And he, I guess you can say, he was kind of a bit of a troll. So he ended up writing a satire of his opponent in this court case. And that's pretty much how he got his start in writing in the first place. And of course, you see these two images of Shakespeare and I guess you could say a satire or a little joke on Hamlet, of one of his more favorite, but more popular plays. Now, you guys may have heard me talking about the Gettysburg Press or people challenging the church. Now, these were elements that happened during the Renaissance. Some background story to the Renaissance is that during the Dark Ages, which gradually became the Middle Ages, that people were heavily influenced by the church. They listened to the church so much more than their own country leaders and stuff like that, because during this time period, people are still trying to battle for power, trying to have more power than the next person and be more powerful, even if it was for a short period of time. And so when the Renaissance came about, this is where people started realizing, hey, I think that we should start focusing towards other areas of seeking power, because obviously our way of trying to get this power by constantly fighting each other with these mercenaries that we constantly keep on hiring, and their loyalty is very fluctuated, might as well start getting our own armies. And that's why you see in this top right photo of a king, or what's supposed to be a king, and his army waltzing off to most likely control a certain fight or whatever the case may be. In addition to that, of course, you have the Universal Man, which is represented here by Henry VIII. And I know what y'all thinking. He's not a looker. He's pretty chunky, and whatever the case may be. But rumor has it in his younger years, he was, by definition, a universal man. He was a Renaissance king or prince in his younger years. And so he was very intelligent. He was very much the athlete. He was quite the looker, so obviously a lot of the ladies went walking towards him. And now, Henry, as the story goes, went to challenge the church, as everyone knows how the story is going to end up being. And so, his skirmish with the Catholic Church and him separating from the Catholic Church made his own vision of what Catholicism should be does influence Shakespeare's work to a certain degree. It may not be heavily hinted throughout Shakespeare's work that he may have some religious undertones, but specifically Romeo and Juliet, you can see how he kind of takes the church as in a jokey sense, like in certain key elements of Friar Lawrence may not giving the best advice, trying to maybe use Romeo and Juliet's marriage to try to fix a problem that is much beyond him, in the sense of where the story goes for Romeo and Juliet, because due to his meddling, a lot of this stuff got blown out to proportion, much more so had he done things more honestly from the get-go. Now, leading us into one of Shakespeare's most notable works, which is Romeo and Juliet. Now, for those of you guys that may not know what Romeo and Juliet is about, here's a general synopsis of what it is. So, in the lovely city of Verona, Italy, there are two feuding families, the Montagues and the Capulets. Now, one evening where Romeo was down in his dumps, really sad that Rosaline was not interested in him, she doesn't want to be with him, she just goes up to be a nun. He was just down in the dumps, he was really sad. So his buddies Benvolio and Mercutio drag him into, or somehow convince him to go to a party that's going on that day. So Romeo just went along with his friends as doing, went to this party. But little does he know, they meet Juliet, who is a Capulet. And upon meeting Juliet, he immediately says that he loves this girl, he will die for this girl, whatever the case may be, and Juliet the same. So they end up meeting each other a little bit later again in the evening, where they both decide, hey, let's get married after knowing each other for even less than 2 days. They end up marrying each other in secret, and little do they know that after their marriage, all chaos is about to break loose. And so when Romeo is walking to the town square, wherever the case may be, he ends up seeing Tybalt walking up, picking a fight with Mercutio and Benvolio. Tybalt, who is wanting to fight Romeo due to Romeo being a Montague, ends up invading one of the Capulets' parties, and Tybalt sees this as very disrespectful and something worthy to fight over. And so Romeo at first does not want to fight Tybalt and just thinks that let's be all kumbaya and sing Hakuna Matata, whatever the case may be. Tybalt doesn't take this lightly, and so he and Mercutio start fighting. And when Tybalt ends up killing Mercutio, this is where things don't end up going too well for Tybalt at all. Romeo wants to avenge his friend's death, takes his sword, fights Tybalt, and ends up killing Tybalt. In doing this, Romeo ends up being banished by the Prince of Verona, and doing so makes Juliet go into a crazy frenzy as of saying, oh my god, where's my husband? What am I going to do? My parents wanted me to force me to marry this man I do not love. I'm about to commit the most ultimate of sins. And Friar Lawrence, thinking that this plan that he come up with is genius, comes up with a plan to help Juliet fake her own death, help her escape with Romeo so they can live happily ever after. Juliet thinks it's a wonderful plan, fakes her own death, and however, word does not get back to Romeo as of what is going on. Romeo ends up finding out in his own mind that Juliet is dead. Yet he hears no word of Rhinelander plan, so he travels back to Verona, takes the poison that he had bought for himself, drinks it, ends up dying right then and there. Juliet, upon awakening from her comatose state, finds that Romeo is dead, so takes the dagger or piece of sword that she finds near her and ends up killing herself just to be with her lover, because she thinks in her mind, much like Romeo, if my love is not here, what's the purpose of living? Yes, that's gruesome. Yes, that's kind of ridiculous that these people may end up killing each other, only know each other for a couple of days, but that's pretty much the purpose of Romeo and Juliet in a grand scheme of things. If it makes y'all feel better, please to look at this nice, lovely meme I found for you guys where Romeo, being the emo child that he is, I will never love again. 1 hour later, let's get married to a chick he just met. Now, when it comes to S. Scott Fitzgerald, he is, of course, a writer. He's not necessarily a playwright, but he is a writer and author. And his time period comes from the Modernism literary time period, where the characteristics of this time period is individualism. Now, for those of you guys that may not be too familiar with this time period where F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote some of his literary works, this is a time that you do yourself. You don't worry about other people, you worry about the here and now. You might look at the past, you just worry about you and what makes you feel good. And of course, this leads us to the next characteristic, which is questioning the past, where some people may not necessarily agree with too many things in the past, may be trying to change the past, but may not always look to the future during this time period. And some inspiration for writing The Great Gatsby came from Fitzgerald's own experiences with his whole illusion surrounding his wife, and his wife, who her name is Zelda. She's inspiration for many of Fitzgerald's works. He loves and adores his wife. He includes her to a lot of his works as much as he can, and upon her having an affair with another man, his whole illusion of her shattered. He is uncertain of how much she really even loves him, and everything she ever told him was a lie. He pretty much turns to this guy right here, who whole illusion just crashed and burned, and he's just left wondering why. And of course, due to this, he ends up writing The Great Gatsby, trying to configure all his thoughts surrounding his wife through his own literary work. And for those of you guys that actually read The Great Gatsby, you will see that I designed this page to represent the book to a certain degree. You would notice that the green light in the bottom right corner of the screen, which is a constant signature lines from this book. Now, you can't be talking about S. Scott Fitzgerald without going into a little bit more detail about the Roaring 1920s. Now, much like the Modernism time period, the 1920s was a very individualist type of culture in the United States of America, where in this, a lot of people focus more on themselves and the here and now. They spent money like crazy, they look at their fancy cars and their dresses and whatever the case may be. Some women started to be a bit more scandalous by wearing dresses that came up to their knees, which I know does not seem as crazy as is nowadays, but back then that was a huge taboo for women to wear dresses that short, or even cut their hair as short as you see the women style their hair in these pictures. And of course, this was the Prohibition era, so a lot of bootlegging was going about, and of course, this was not necessarily the safest thing, but people still did it to make money, to make ends meet. And of course, you see a lot of these themes within The Great Gatsby, because of course America, we're very individualist. We tend to think more about ourselves than the greater group of the whole, of people just having fun, having parties, living in the moment, which is typical again of the 1920s. Of course. Now introducing The Great Gatsby. Now before anyone says anything, the biggest third reel in novel history, according to this meme, is Nick Carraway. That's how I pronounce his name, sue me for it. However, when it comes to Nick, he in The Great Gatsby plays a role that not many people, upon hearing about Gatsby, may not always realize. He ends up moving next to Jay Gatsby, gets to have a little vacation in New York. And so, little does he know, by living next to this man and having Nick's own connection to his cousin Daisy, this Gatsby began to be very interested in forming a quote-unquote friendship with Nick. And so Gatsby, after having Nick go to one of his parties, convinces Nick, after a period of time, to set up a meeting between him and his cousin Daisy. Now, I'm going to take a couple steps back to say to you guys that Daisy, Nick's cousin, is already married, she already has a child, but she and Gatsby have a history with each other. During the Great War, or World War I, where Gatsby was an officer during World War I, she and Gatsby had a fling for a short period of time before he was drawn back into the military, and her family's like, yeah, you're not marrying a poor man, and she realized herself that she did not want to marry a poor man. So Jay Gatsby, after a long period of time, ended up gaining all this money, and he wanted to get Daisy back to him, because in his mind, following that green light, that dream that he has to be with this woman. So somehow, again, convinces Nick to set up this meeting between him and Daisy. When Daisy and Gatsby meet, it slowly became like putting like two toddlers together and slowly introducing them like, hey, Jimmy, this is your friend Sally. And just them slowly having awkward conversations with each other until eventually they became more comfortable with each other and talking more and more with each other. And this, of course, sets in chain more events. Daisy allowed herself to begin an affair with Jay Gatsby, primarily because she wanted to get a little bit of vengeance from her own husband, Tom, who at the same time is having an affair with a woman named Myrtle Wilson for a long period of time. And near the very end of the book, Daisy, due to her wanting revenge against this woman who took her husband's affections from her onto, I guess, again, the other woman, took Gatsby's car as she and Gatsby were driving back to his mansion, ran Myrtle over, committed basically a hit and run, drove off, left Myrtle there to die, and she allowed Gatsby to take the blame for this murder. Tom, her husband, was very furious and wanted to know who obviously did this, who killed his mistress. Did not think it was his wife. He, like Mr. Wilson, who was Myrtle's husband, was really distraught about his wife's death. Didn't even think that his wife was deserved this sort of thing at all. So he took it upon himself to go and up to Gatsby's house and shoot him. And this leads us into the type of person Daisy is, which we're going to dive in more detail in the next few slides. But Daisy did not attend Gatsby's funeral, and at Gatsby's funeral, very few people came at all. Seems pretty sad, doesn't seem as exciting as people see in the trailers for The Great Gatsby, but that is the general synopsis for it. And again, Nick, our lovely third wheel, who set up these two, I guess you can say, star-crossed lovers, and this ended up being part of the story. Of course. Now, going back to the very first slide in this whole presentation, I introduced the love and loss conversation. And this love and loss conversation between these two works is that they involve, of course, death of a certain character. And how these characters handle their love and loss varies greatly depending on the character that we're looking at. In Romeo and Juliet, they are so involved with their supposed love for each other that they couldn't handle the loss of one another, hence why they end up murdering, or not murdering, rather committing suicide, just so they can end up being with each other in the afterlife. Whereas in The Great Gatsby, that's not really necessarily the case, as every character reacts to love and loss in various different ways. Whereas some of them react to their loss via murder, others react to their loss in terms of screaming at their spouse for cheating and having an affair that's been going for a long period of time. Or some may handle their loss via, like, I'm just going to take the blame for this person that I love, and hopefully it goes well and they end up coming back to me. That sort of illusion that they may have in reaction to their loss. And the love in both cases just is like people think that this sort of short period term of love is the best sort of thing that could ever happen to them. And the reason why I picked these two works to even have this conversation is that, of course, they just seem to pair very well with each other. They, in a weird way, they just seem to pair well with each other. They have these two people at some point in time meet up. They have some sort of fling or some sort of love, whatever you would like to call it. At the very end, someone dies. At least one person dies. And so that's why I ended up picking these two works, because they seem to work so well in that sort of regard. Now leading into the body paragraphs, we come across women rebelling against societal rules. Now, let's start off with Daisy and Jay Gatsby. Daisy, she rebels against her own societal rules of just being faithful to your husband. Her, in her mind, wanted a vengeance against her husband for cheating on her, begins an affair with Jay Gatsby. In a way, attributing to her loss of her husband's fidelity and the loss of his love, in a way, thinks that this affair is a way to get him back, just to get that love and attention that she so desperately needs, in addition to getting that money, because she is indeed greedy, to a certain degree. This is very different from the way Juliet rebels against societal rules, and even handles her love and loss. Whereas Juliet, who really wants to be faithful to her own husband, which is Romeo, fakes her own death, just have control over who she wants to marry. And this is very much against societal rules in her time period, because for the most part, family members choose who their daughters are supposed to marry in, at the very least, upper class society, which Juliet is part of that upper class society. So for her to go against her family rules of marrying this boy, who her family does not know about, is interested in her, nor knows that she is married to said boy, is a huge taboo. And she handles this love for Romeo to such an extreme degree that she is willing to die for him. Like, if anything was to happen to Romeo, she cannot live with this. And so she handles her love to such an extreme degree, which is quite the opposite of Daisy, who handles her love for Jay Gatsby as a way to treat the loss that she has with her own husband, Tom. Moving on to the next theme in terms of, or I guess I could rather say a body paragraph, is the development of a dream/goal. Now, starting off with Romeo and Juliet, Romeo has this dream, this fantasy that he and Juliet will live happily ever after, they'll get married, and everything will be fine. However, this is not always the very case for Romeo. His fantasy of living happily ever after with Juliet with nothing going wrong in between is pretty much shattered with, of course, Tybalt fighting him, and that leads to unintended consequences of Tybalt dying and Romeo being banished, leading to the events of eventually he and Juliet committing suicide, thinking that the other is dead or is actually dead. And this, to a degree, shows the development of Romeo's dream coming into fruition. He has his love for Juliet recreated. She loves him, and she, much like him, is willing to die for each other, which is pretty much the opposite of what Jay Gatsby has in The Great Gatsby. As you can see here, this man who represents Jay Gatsby is dreaming about Daisy. And this sort of dream or fantasy, this goal that Jay Gatsby has is that Daisy's going to come back to him. He'll live this wonderful life with her in his mansion. They'll follow this American dream, have 2 kids, and whatever the case may be, white picket fences, and just following that green light that is hinted a little bit throughout the whole entire story. Which, unfortunately for Jay Gatsby, he does not have the same fortune as Romeo. His love for Daisy is pretty much unrequited. He's pretty much used by Daisy for his money, for his affection, for everything that he gives to Daisy, she just uses. Which was represented at the very end where Daisy doesn't even attend Gatsby's funeral. She just leaves him after he does all these things for her, even risking his own life on the line by taking the blame for Myrtle's murder. And, which, in a way, he represents something that Romeo could have been had his love for Juliet not been requited. Leading into one, I guess you could say, one of my more favorite parts of my body paragraphs is a wolf in sheep's clothing. And this is represented in various ways, most specifically with Daisy. Daisy, from the moment you meet her, she sounds like she's the sweetest girl on the planet. She sounds so innocent. She sounds like the most classiest lady you have ever met. That is until you learn about her more, I guess say, dangerous parts of her personality, or parts of her own behavior that is represented throughout the book. And one of those instances, upon her finding out about the affair between her husband and Myrtle Wilson, she is not really pleased. She starts going behind her husband's back and still being pretending to be this little sheep who's trying to be this perfect little wife. Yet, behind her, when she's actually a wolf in sheep's clothing, she's doing a couple things behind her back. And the moment she has the opportunity to kill Myrtle, she takes a hold of it. She speeds up, does not stop, and ends up killing the woman who, in her eyes, took the affection from her husband that's supposed to be for her and was given to this mistress, aka Myrtle. And so Daisy represents this wolf in sheep's clothing so very well, because you never could have guessed just by looking at her that she has this dark nature within her to just be able to murder somebody and just let somebody else take the blame for it without much a remorse, at least for what's told by us within the works of The Great Gatsby. Juliet, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily take the full extreme Daisy has gone to just to get revenge on somebody else for taking the affections away from her. Rather, Juliet takes the wolf in sheep's clothing in a route that I guess you could say it's slightly more relatable to some people who have gone through a time where they specifically don't like to listen to what their parents are saying, but just pretend to go along with it just so they can get what they want or just to go through their plan. Your parents want you to do the dishes or want you to be the perfect child. You play that up so very well
so that lady can sneak out and, I don't know, run to the arcade and play video games, or ride your motorcycle all the way up a mountain. The choice is yours. However, in Juliet's case, she goes along with her family's plans of her wanting to marry Paris while she's secretly planning to fake her own death. In her eyes, why she's such a wolf in sheep's clothing is that she doesn't really consider the aspect that more than just one person's going to be affected by her faking her own death, because they think she's actually dead. She doesn't think about the nurse who has cared for her since she was pretty much in diapers, how she's going to feel when Juliet is quote-unquote dead. And what makes Juliet be this wolf is that she pretends to be so innocent in this instant. And she, being as she is, she may not realize that what she's going to be doing affects so many people. Yet, based on her dialogues, she pretty much knows what she is doing. She knows pretty much well that she's going to go through this, and she is going to be fine at the very end. She'll be with her Romeo. And just playing up the card of a perfect child all the way up till her actual quote-unquote fake death. Which is different terms of Daisy, whereas Juliet just does it to be with her lover. Daisy does her own actions just to get revenge on her husband and let her lover take the fall. And now, the moment y'all been waiting for, the power of karma. Now, the two characters you see on screen is Tybalt from one representation of Romeo and Juliet in terms of the film adaptation, and on the right you see Myrtle Wilson from The Great Gatsby, one of the more modern interpretations of The Great Gatsby. And these two characters represent karma in a couple of different ways. And let's start off with, of course, Tybalt. Tybalt, who, the firecracker that he is, loves to fight. He's the definition of a young man who always wants to fight, always wants to prove his dominance, always wants to be right, yet does not have enough self-awareness to realize the path that he's going towards will only bring him trouble. And with Tybalt, upon seeing Romeo invading his family's party, he immediately wants to kick him out. He wants to beat him to the curb, while his uncle, Capulet, he just says to him, Tybalt, calm down. You went from 0 to 100 real quick. You need to calm down. Of course, Tybalt, being the guy that he is, pretends to listen to what his uncle is saying, but in reality, he's not listening to what his uncle is saying. He's still going to continue with this plan to get revenge on Romeo for quote-unquote disrespecting his family by going to a party that was only by invitation only, and somehow Romeo got in. And in so, at the very end, like most of you guys have read the play, have known, is that Tybalt gets comeuppance by him fighting Romeo after Tybalt kills Mercutio in a battle, or I guess you could say a duel with each other. And Tybalt, being the cocky one that he is, thinks he's going to win, thinks he's going to get his revenge on Romeo, but in the very end dies at the hands of his quote-unquote enemy, also his cousin-in-law, even though Tybalt did not know that in his death, that Romeo was related to him now due to him marrying Juliet. And this represents karma in such a big, huge way. This represents Tybalt's loss. Tybalt's love for himself, for his family's honor, blinding him so much that he did not realize the loss of his own life was caused by him being blinded by this love that he has for his family. And, of course, at the very end, he paid for it. This is quite different from Myrtle Wilson, or in her better known case, Tom Buchanan, who was her lover. And Tom, he's, I could say, by definition, the hugest hypocrite you can ever have. He talks like he's holier than thou, talks about people being faithful to their husbands and their wives and whatever the case may be, yet he himself is going an ongoing affair with a woman for a long period of time. And so he gets his comeuppance in a way by his own mistress, unbeknownst to Tom, who actually killed his wife thinking that it was Gatsby. His own wife ends up killing Myrtle with Gatsby's car. And even though, again, Tom did not know Daisy's the one that killed Myrtle, it shows the biggest power of karma. Tom talks all this mess about fidelity, yet in the very end, the woman that he was in love with got murdered by his wife, and his wife got revenge on the mistress who she felt wronged her instead of taking her frustrations on her husband. It takes two to tango. And again, it just shows that in terms of love and loss, people do crazy things. They may not think straight, like in terms of Tom's case. He might think that he's holier than thou. He has his love for his mistress on the side, get that side action, while he has his wife on the other hand, who he has just for like, hey, I'm married, I have a kid, just to show off to society that he is the quote-unquote proper man. But yeah, he's so blinded by this image that in the very end, it just leads to his hypocrisy killing him, losing the love of his life, supposedly, Myrtle. And again, in Tybalt's case, his love for his family only leads to his very own downfall in the end of him being blinded by his pride.
When it comes to love and loss, one of the grand scheme of these ideas is that it's something that happens throughout a lifetime, and how someone reacts to love and loss varies depending on the individual and of course the situation is given at hand. Some people can be very extreme with their thoughts and emotions when it comes to love and loss. Others can be more passive and be more, I guess you can say, agreeable in some instances just for the greater good of the group or the person that they may love. In terms of the grand scheme of society, again, it's just something that people go through. As you can see here, that love you may have, it could be for your friends. You may love them very much, and then the next moment you guys have a huge falling out, and you experience a sense of loss. Or with a significant other, you guys may think that person may be the one for you, and it doesn't turn out the way you want to, and you may experience loss. In general, when it comes to literature, it always finds a way for humans to come full circle and realize some things about themselves that they may not always think about. You can read a piece of literature and analyze it and maybe even realize that they need to change their behavior to better improve themselves. Yeah, that might not always be the case. In the grand scheme of things in terms of the future, society will be able to potentially look through more of these works and maybe develop their own new literary works that dives into the issues of love and loss in a way that makes more sense for the current time period.